housekeeping, and then I'm going to pass you on to Marion, who will start us off and go through the agenda for today. So as Fran's already said, if you can keep your mics on mute, it just helps for background noise to make sure that you can hear us properly. You can have your cameras on or off. For the recording, you will not see any cameras, you'll only see ourselves, so don't worry about that, but it's up to yourself. If you're asking a question at the end, it would be nice to see your face, but it's not necessary. As Fran has said, use the chat box to change to all participants. That way, all panelists even, I think it should say, instead of participants, all panelists. And then that way we can see who it is, like all the questions that come in. When we're into the live Q&A, please don't talk over each other. We just want to make sure that we're being respectful to each other. Please keep all chats and clean so that we can share them. We are recording this presentation and it will be shared. Like Fran says, it'll come out on an email. It will also be added onto Public Contracts Scotland. So you'll be able to see the link there, and they will also send the email along with the slides. All slides will be shared, so you don't need to do any screenshots because you'll be able to have them. So that'll be fine. I'm just going to shrink. I'm sharing, so I'm struggling a little bit here. So we're just going to move on to the next slide. Marion, do you want to take over from here? And Fran, we can start the recording.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Accredited Pathways and Certified Counsellors and Therapies opportunity. I'm just going to go through the agenda. So Fran has already done some introductions. I'm Marion Austin, Strategic Planning and Commissioning Officer. I have Anna Penman, my procurement colleague, and Stephen is Senior Education Manager, Stephen Kelly, and Martin Gemmell will be joining us in a little while, and Martin is Principal Educational Psychologist. So we're going to go through what this opportunity covers. We're going to talk about who should apply and who will buy from the framework. We're also going to go through some of the feedback on the specification. The specification was published for comments, which were that was closed. That opportunity to comment was closed last week. So I'll just discuss a bit about what we received from providers. Then I'm going to pass over to Anna, who's going to go through procurement and timescales. So the Accredited Pathways and Certified Counselling and Therapies framework is an opportunity for us to work with providers to create a compliant framework of commissioned services. What that means is we're going to have central regulation of all the services we work with, which are all going to the process will include monitoring. We'll ask you for some questions about what you do in terms of a method statement, and we're going to gather all the information together so we have all policies and procedures, all insurance. We know that everybody's had their relevant training, had the relevant checks. So when we do that at the beginning of the process, we don't have to keep doing it repeatedly as we work with different providers. The vision for Edinburgh is to promote the future of children and young people as successful learners, confident individuals, responsible citizens and effective contributors, and ensure excellence by raising attainment and improving outcomes through accredited pathways. So this framework, for any of you that are on the PEF framework, this framework will replace elements of the PEF framework. There's a focus at the centre of the work we're doing through this framework, and it will support every child and young person to succeed, with a particular focus on closing the poverty-related attainment gap, which has 4 key themes. These are attendance, literacy and numeracy, pathways, health and well-being. So there are 2 lots in the framework. Lot 1 is accredited pathways, and Lot 2 is certified counselling and therapies. So this opportunity covers pathways. Pathways, Stephen, maybe you want to talk a bit more about this one. It's relevant to education.
Yeah, I can take over from here if that's okay. So just building on what Marion was saying, we've got a vision for young people, children and young people in Edinburgh, and we want every child and young person to thrive and have the best lives they can possibly have. And part of that, and that's very much wrapped up in social justice, part of that is closing the poverty-related attainment gap, as Marion just outlined. And we certainly believe that that gap is caused by young people living with disadvantage. And what we are trying to do is provide learning, skills, remove the barriers so that gap is closed. And that's what we're trying to do through everything that we offer to young people. When we talk about curriculum, what I understand by curriculum is everything a young person experiences. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so we're looking for services that are going to help us close that gap. As I said, that gap will be closed through learning, through skills development, through the removal of barriers. And it's really important to us that that we have the best people to do this sort of a work. It's complex work. The gap and the causes for the gap are many, varied, and have lots of complexity. And we want to plan this work through the GIRFEC process and through an assessment of need. And most of the needs identified will be met by City of Edinburgh Council staff. But there will be situations where we are not best placed to meet that need, to remove that barrier. And this is about, this particular framework is about having access to partners who can support us in closing that gap through that learning and through that meeting of need. That last line there saying offer accreditation. So if we are working with our partners, with young people, children and young people out of school in perhaps a flexible or an alternative curriculum pathway, then that pathway, that experience has to be planned. And that experience has to be planned using our curriculum frameworks. So that's Curriculum for Excellence for young people in early right through to third year. And that's the senior phase for young people in S4, 5 and 6. So we have to plan it so that they have the highest quality curriculum experience, whether or not they're in school, working with CEC staff, or out of school, working with our partners. If we have this quality experience, then we then need to assess it and give accreditation. Can we go onto the next slide? So what we're looking for, if you're working with young people in the broad general education, that's early right through to S3, we're looking for those experiences to be planned using the experiences and outcomes as stated in Curriculum for Excellence documentation. And we're looking for the assessment to be planned using Curriculum for Excellence benchmarks, which essentially are collections of E's and O's. And we use that in school to assess what young people do in the broad general education. Now, we fully understand that for most of you, that will be a new piece of work. What we are saying is that any potential provider can contact schools and ask for support in developing this particular accreditation. If we're looking for accreditation, or if you're offering services to young people in the senior phase, then the accreditation needs to come from either the Scottish Certification Qualifications Framework, Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework, and that contains the SQA suite of courses and awards, and it's really quite broad. So you've got, in addition to your nationals, you've got a whole load of awards around volunteering, leadership, personal development, and many more. If that doesn't suit what you're doing, there is a range of wider achievement awards, things like Duke of Edinburgh, John Muir, Saltire. There are, again, many awarding bodies. What we're asking for is that these awarding bodies are nationally recognised if you're offering this. There's also a possibility looking at activity agreements and looking at employability awards through the SQA suite as well. And again, similar to the work in the broad general education, if you're looking for support, any provider can contact a school and get advice on how best to frame this accreditation. We will be using this accreditation to actually to judge the impact of the work. So right now, most of the third-party spend of schools comes from PEF funding, pupil equity funding, that's given to schools directly from the Scottish Government to close the gap. And schools are asked essentially, what are the outcomes per spend? So if we're working with third sector or any third-party spend of our school from our PEF budget, we'll be looking to this accreditation as one of the methods to judge the impact of this. So schools are asked to talk about things like attendance, things like literacy and numeracy, things like the quality of pathways, things like health and wellbeing measures. What we're looking for from providers is accreditation that outlines the assessment of young people that has come from their work with them. And we'll be using this data to evaluate the impact of this work. So that's me.
So our colleague Martin Gemmell is joining us, Principal Educational Psychologist, and Martin will go now to explain what the opportunity covers for counselling and therapies.
Thank you very much, Marion, and thank you, Stephen. And I timed that quite well, didn't I? I was in another meeting at the same time. I do apologise. So with counselling, to begin with, the Scottish Government funded local authorities to set up school counselling several years ago now, and the City of Edinburgh went down the route of employing their own school counsellors. Some other local authorities gave almost all of the Scottish Government money to third sector or voluntary sector providers. But the Scottish Government was very prescriptive in who that applied to, and it was all done through the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapists and the COSCA, the Scottish version of that regulatory body. And because those were the regulatory bodies that had spoken to the Scottish Government. That's the history of it, and it became grow a profession known as school counselling. And if I'm being sort of upfront, I don't know that there are enough school counsellors in Scotland to cover every school. There's a lot of poaching staff from one organisation to another organisation. That seems to go on. So the Scottish Government has relaxed a little bit the sort of specification on that to allow other types of therapy, and we support that. We think that it should be counselling and therapies, and this framework is a way of bringing in counselling, but also bringing in additional types of therapy that schools may wish to purchase, as Stephen has just outlined. And really, if you could move to the next slide, please. I think what I'm saying now is more pertinent to that slide. Thank you. Yes, so any therapist should be certified or registered with a nationally recognised regulatory body. Now, I'm picking an example because I knew a couple of educational psychologists who previously were dance therapists. The dance therapy doesn't normally appear in a lot of these things, but it's just one that I'm picking because I'm partial to it. They are regulated by a national body, so that's fine, as would music therapists or drama therapists or art therapists would all be regulated by a nationally recognised body, and that could be Scotland or it could be United Kingdom. And that is how what we're trying to do is to ensure that there's an equitable offer on a kind of broadly similar strata, if you like, of regulation, and schools can access, for instance, there is a school in Craigmillar where dance is a huge thing as well, and Margot, the head teacher there, is you know, that's a great thing, and that is all regulated, and it's just about trying to make sure that options that are available are all accredited in the same broad. It can't be identical, but broadly in the same way, so that if a school wishes to supplement the school counsellor that they have, which is paid for by the Scottish Government, then that they can use funds to have a contract with a provider, some of you here today maybe, where you are able to bring in your expertise that we're very grateful for to supplement what's already in the school and look at the targets around this pupils and the students' health and well-being. So for instance, the play therapy, I've just picked that one, I'm picking all the therapies today, but play therapy is largely going to be with younger children, or possibly in the school that I'm in today, where the children are largely non-verbal. But we're trying to broaden out the scope of what the Scottish Government started with its idea on school counsellors, but to do it in this framework and to do it in a way that we can be sure that whenever a school does wish to use funds, that it's done in a standardised way and it's done in a regulated way, so that it's not there isn't a kind of a sprawl, if you like, in what is available where, or a postcode lottery. So these are the things that we're trying to avoid, and that's why we're trying to introduce this framework, and we do hope that you are interested in being on that framework. So I think that would be, you know, if you were then successful, there would be, the last point there is about targets that we're trying to achieve, so that we know when a piece of work is finished and the target has been achieved. And that can sometimes, in this landscape, sometimes, you know, the average length of input can be quite long, and there may be a waiting list and things like that. So that's about trying to just get to the bottom of what is the, you know, the best way to provide particular types of therapy or other services. So that is, I think, me at the end of my slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. I think, yeah, Marion, you're back in.
Yes, so we're now talking about who should apply. So any organisation who receives payment from the council in return to their services, which are aligned to the details that we supplied in the specification. If anybody didn't read the specification when it was out for feedback, it will be published again with the other tender documents. The title may be quite off-putting because everyone might not feel they fit into that, but I would suggest reading the specification for full details, as there are a lot of avenues and it's quite complex in terms of what we're looking for. So any individual or organisation who intend to charge for their services in the future, so it may be that you're offering free supports in school at the moment, but you have a plan to be charging in the future, so you would need to be on the framework going forward to be able to work with Edinburgh Council. So obviously Stephen and Martin have given quite detailed descriptions of who we'll be working with in terms of counsellors and therapists, and also what we'll be looking for in terms of accreditation. Most of the work that we're going to be doing will take part during the school day, and it all must contribute to the young person's curriculum experience. Next slide, please, Anna. So who does not need to apply? So if you're offering free services and you have no intent to charge at any point in the future, then you do not need to apply to be on the framework. Anyone who volunteers directly with a school or other council service, including parent volunteers, would not need to apply to be on the framework either. And obviously any organisation who doesn't want to work with Edinburgh Council, either now or in the future, does not need to apply. Counselling and therapy services who don't hold certification recognised by a governing body can't apply for the counselling and therapies lot. There may be supports that are offered for wellbeing, and as long as these contribute towards the curriculum for excellence and meet the experiences and outcomes, then they can be applied for through the first lot, which is the accredited pathways. So why apply? So as I explained a little bit at the beginning, we're having frameworks because it avoids a lot of duplication. It makes everything centrally managed, centrally regulated. We can do all the checks. We are only going to be working with contracted providers going forward. So if you're not on a framework, we will not be able to continue working with you. The benefits to providers, well, once you are on the framework, you only need to provide this information once. They'll be put onto the council's central payment systems. Schools and other council services will have access to your company's information and what you're able to offer. Schools and other council services will use the FPS in the first instance. Anna, can you remind me FPS?
Flexible purchasing system, I'll discuss it later.
Okay, Anna will discuss the flexible purchasing system later. And this is how you'll be able to find, schools will be able to find services that meet the identified need. There will be access to appropriate training made available. So who will buy from the framework? Mainly schools, and that includes primary, secondary and special schools. Social workers will have access to the providers list, so there may be some referrals from social work and council managed community centres. So we did receive some feedback on the specification. I think probably the most notable thing and the area that was questioned the most was around counselling and therapies and whether they needed to be accredited in the same way that the pathways do. So with what we're looking for in terms of targets with counselling and therapies is the school will set targets for the young person and the counselling and the therapies will add to the completion of those targets. And I suppose having a goal, I know not all therapies work in a kind of goal or focus centred manner, but having a kind of end place where they want to be or something that they want to achieve, or like a contract where they know what the path is. So to be clear on what the focus of the therapy is. So thank you for everyone who did respond. I've also been asked about for a little bit more information about the Edinburgh imperatives, so I will add in a link to them in the appendix. And it was also noted that there was just a formatting error in the insurance section, so that will also be updated. As I said, a few things will be changed in the counselling and therapies section just to make it a little clearer. There was a question around communication, which will be a joint responsibility between the council and provider. And clarity on notice periods will be noted in the specification. We would ask for 24 hours notice, and that would be a reciprocal arrangement. But obviously I will update that in the actual document. Over to you, Anna.
Yes, so thank you, Marion. Yes, so for the procurement element, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to make it too confusing for yourself, but all councils are governed by Public Contract Scotland Regulations 2015. This puts, although the services we plan to be are considered through the light touch, it does still mean that we have to comply with certain regulations. So that things like to be open, transparent, give people equal opportunities. We have to have what we call a single procurement document, which is a list of all the questions for mandatory exclusion grounds. And there's a few discretionary ones that we'll also be implementing. We have to do award notices. So that's something that we'll do, which is always done on Public Contract Scotland. And for this one, we are doing everything as a pass-fail. So that I spoke about it being a flexible purchasing system. I don't think I actually have a slide on it, but I can tell you about it. I'll just go on. Sorry, everything's underneath. Yeah, I'll go on to the next slide and you'll be able to see it. So for this one is the model. So it's an agreement that covers the whole of Edinburgh, across the whole of the city, all schools. We're wanting to have a number of organisations. We're not reducing or limiting the number of organisations to be able to apply. And the arrangements always need to put the needs of the young person first. So we're doing an open procedure under the light touch. This is where FPS, a flexible purchasing system element, comes in. I do it under the process as well. We've got the use of Public Contract Scotland, which I'll show you. Most of you have already noted interest into the Public Contract Scotland. Some of you may be aware of the other system that we'll be using, which is Public Contract Scotland Tender. And that's where you actually do your application. So the first one is where you just note your interest, and the second one is where you actually put your application in. for this one, because it's a flexible purchasing system that we're using, it's going to be that you can apply throughout the year. So it's always open. However, we're going to make it so that we review it on an annual basis, and we're planning at the moment for that to be in a February time. So it'll open now, but then it'll open again in February. So hopefully that means that people have the opportunity to continue to apply, and it gives us the opportunity to make sure that we have the best services available for children and young people. So the contract notice is going to be on Public Contract Scotland, PCS we call it, and the other system that we call is PCST. A flexible purchasing, I switch between agreement and system, they're the same thing. It's where it's open all the time, so people can apply. It's flexible in that it's in a normal procurement, we wouldn't allow people to apply on an ongoing basis, but where we are, so that's what makes it more flexible. And call-offs, so you only get a contract when a school identifies a need. So at the moment, all it will be is you'll be placed onto a list of organisations who have gone through the checks, and then a school will have a need, and they'll be able to approach organisations who are on this list so that they can order a service or contract for a service for the children's and young people. So that's kind of what it is that we're looking to do. How it will work, it'll be open via PCST, Public Contract Scotland tender. I've got a whole slide on it. Submissions, the first submissions will be evaluated in this side of Christmas. A recommendation report then goes off get signed off so that management agree with our outcomes. The agreement goes live and organisations can be awarded contracts. It then kind of circles back round to that you can apply on PCST. So if you don't get in on the first round, then you can have conversations with schools and conversations with commissioning to see why you didn't get around, and then reapply. There is no limit on how many times you can apply, but it will be assessed on an ongoing basis. And then it kind of follows the recircle around every time. So, and that'll be in February. Again, I'm going to say there's no guarantee that if you get onto the agreement that you'll actually get any contracts. It's all about meeting the needs of the young people. So they take the lead for this. The timeline on this one is actually ever so slightly moved. We were hoping to have it out by September, but actually I think to make sure that we have it right, we're looking now into October. The planned event Fran will be talking about is currently for the 10th of October. I think we'll need to push that a couple of weeks just to give us extra time. Submissions will be the end of November, so it's quite a short period of time for you to be able to submit. But like I said, it will open back up and you'll be able to apply. If you don't have time to do it now, you'll be able to apply later on. Obviously, we would like you on in the first round rather than later on, but that's an option. And then we're hoping to have the whole thing ready for schools to be able to see in March 2024. There's quite a lot of background work that needs to go on to make sure that it's all ready for the schools to see. It's all subject to change, just like anything that we always discuss. So the systems that we're using, they're mandated by Scottish Government. So Public Contract Scotland is one of the areas that are mandated by Scottish Government. It's you register for free. All of the systems we use are registering for free. You have to note a note of interest in the prior information. If you do that, then you'll get notifications through Public Contract Scotland, like the one that we're going to send this afternoon with the slides on. That will then email you out. We will then also advertise the opening of the contract notice, it's called. It's very similar, but it has all the details of what it is we require as a minimum. And again, I'll be able to, if you note your note of interest in the PIN, I'll be able to make sure that you get an email to say that the contract notice is live. They do have a help desk of their own. They are quite helpful actually if you phone them. So I've just put their contact details there, and at the wee bottom I've put their link. The other one that we're using is Public Contract Scotland Tender. Not quite sure why Scottish Government used exactly the same name. Sometimes causes a slight confusion, but they are two completely different separate websites. Public Contract Scotland Tender always has the kelpies in the background that spin over and over again, so you know you're on the right website when you go onto that one. Again, it's free to register. You can use, we're using PCST as the mechanism or the process. It has 3 envelopes in it. It'll have the qualification envelope, which has the single procurement document. That's where we have all of the pass-fail elements of that are mandated by Scottish Government. And then we'll have a technical envelope, which we're proposing again to be a pass-fail section, where we are having only 2 questions. So that's a change from the sports and physical activities lessons learned. So we're only going to have 2 questions around safeguarding and around how you're actually going to deliver it. And then we're going to have a commercial envelope that's not going to be scored. Obviously it will be reviewed and schools can make a choice at that point, but you'll be able to fill it out and we'll be able to put that onto hopefully our purchasing system, so to help schools. And again at the bottom we've got a link. I'm going to let Fran talk if she's there. I'm not sure, I can't see her on the last one. If she's not there, I'll just carry on. Oh, she is there for the Supplier Development Programme.
Yes, I'm here. Are we finished with the presentation, Anna? Can I stop the recording at this point?
Yes, we've just got this one last slide and then obviously we go on to questions. So that
I'll let you finish the slide then and I'll do a wee bit about SDP and everything that we have that can help you between now and your deadline, and then we'll go live onto your Q&A.
Okay, so yeah, that's literally the end of our presentation. We've got is questions.